Thank you for joining us on this webinar today. We appreciate your time here on this Wednesday afternoon, and we're really excited to share what we have today. My name is Bronson, as Connor said. My job here is to sort of grease the wheels and be a facilitator of the conversation for Christy, but also monitor the chat. So thank you for piping in there, telling us where you're viewing from. We have some people from Philly, from Huntington Beach, all across the country and across the world. We had somebody from the Bahamas even that joined in. So thank you. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. I will be watching and I'll pose them to Christy, but it is my pleasure to introduce you again to Christy, who is one of my personal favorite people here at Awardco, and she is an expert in her field, and I'm very excited that you all get to hear from her today. So Christy, how are you? How's your life going today?
I'm great. I'm in Southern California, San Diego as well. So it's just after lunch, but so excited to have folks joining from the East Coast towards the end of their day, and just so excited to talk on this topic. I think right now is such an incredible time to be doing work for good. And this presentation is all about doing work for good for our employees. So as Connor said, I'm part of the Awardco Center of Excellence. So I've been in employee engagement and benefits and mergers and acquisition. But my favorite piece as employee experience has evolved is really this recognition piece, making sure that all of our employees feel seen, heard, recognized. And the most exciting thing is, as part of the Center of Excellence, we have some great data to back this up, which all of our leaders always ask for. So I'm excited to jump into that today. So a lot of ground to cover, and Bronson, just let me know if there's things in the chat that we want to address, but we'll explore how recognition directly impacts 4 key pillars: engagement, retention, inclusion, and also well-being, that kind of burnout space when people are giving extra efforts. So we often talk about how recognition is not a nice to have, but it's a key business imperative, and it's a key acquisition and retention strategy. But there are strategies that work better than others. So we want to get a little bit more granular today based on some of the research. Talk about different employee groups, titles, ages, industries, and how it plays across those groups. And then if you're starting to build a program, or you're changing programs, or you're just reimagining recognition in your workplace, hopefully this will give you some really tangible ways to design your program for people to be seen at work. So excited to kick it off. So why recognition is so powerful? It's because recognition is part of the motivation machine that really drives all of us. And so as we think about motivation, maybe get the juices flowing a little bit. I think Bronson's going to launch a poll. Interested in what you think just off the top. What do you think is more powerful, that intrinsic, that internal motivation, the thing that makes you feel fired up inside, or extrinsic motivation, sort of what people are saying or thinking, or how other people around you are giving you feedback about what you're doing? So we'll open up the chat for the poll.
There you go. Yeah, you should see that poll right there that you can just answer it. And as we've got a bunch of answers coming in here, it's exciting to see that. I know how I personally feel like I'm motivated, but I sometimes wonder if what I think I'm motivated by and what I'm actually motivated by is different. So I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but it's a really interesting question to consider. All right, we got some votes coming in. Thank you for participating here. We'll give it just a few more seconds and we'll close the poll. This is a great spread. Thank you. All right, Christy, I'm going to show you the results. Are you ready?
All right, I had a prediction, so let's see how it. Okay.
All right, here we go. All right, so it's processing the results, and we should get those here in a moment. I think it might be pretty close to what you're thinking.
All right. Yep. This was my prediction. I think I won the bet. So if you're a parent or you're a teacher or you've been a manager, you often hear this piece, right? That intrinsic drive, if your kid's playing sports or you want them to succeed academically, they've got to have that intrinsic piece. But I think the spoiler alert, it's really about the combination of both. They both help us with our brains. And so that's exactly what I thought. We'd sort of be 2-to-1 on intrinsic versus extrinsic. So let's dive a little bit into this. So this intrinsic is different from extrinsic, right? We said, I do this because I love it. I do this because I'm connected to the mission of what I'm doing. I do this because I feel personal ownership. I have that pride in what I'm doing. But Extrinsic is important too. I do this because of financial reward. We do work for a paycheck, and that's part of how we get motivated to do our work. I do this because others are doing it, right? That sort of positive peer pressure. And then I do this because others will see it. So motivation, recognition, it sort of has this mix of the quality, the kind of quality of your work, but also the quantity. Can you double down? Can you give more discretion? Are you feeling supported by those around you? Are you getting that external motivation as well? The other thing about extrinsic is some of us have to do jobs that we're not particularly excited about sometimes, right? Expense reports or things that just aren't the most exciting. That extrinsic can really help us, just give us that tangible dopamine hit, that tangible reward for something that's a little bit less exciting. So as we think about our frontline employees or our caregivers, that can be really important for those less glamorous, really difficult kinds of jobs. So thanks everyone for participating. We want to tap into ways that we can use both of these motivations, and that's what we do in the recognition space. So I want to talk for a minute about money and monetary recognition, because this comes into play a lot as we talk to companies about building their recognition programs and how that helps with motivation. As HR professionals, we know there's never enough money. The bonuses are never big enough. People always are asking for more, but it doesn't always connect us to motivation. In fact, I've seen recognition programs that only do compensation-based awards, right? They connect the money right away. And in that situation, you are a little at risk of building an entitlement culture, right? Every time I thank Bronson, I'm like, hey, Bronson, you did a great job. Here's $15, right? That starts to wire that connection between saying thank you and getting something tangible. So we really look to double down on the non-monetary. In fact, when we ask people in our workshops, when have you felt most recognized? It's often a non-monetary. It's a note from your manager. It's I put something on my fridge before that came from my manager. It's a phone call. It's maybe an event where my family was invited. It's the ability to go to a conference like SHRM. It's the ability to present for something like this, or maybe meet with someone higher up. There's a lot of non-monetary things that can really help drive engagement. Not to say that it doesn't maybe supercharge it or add a little extra pizzazz to your recognition. So we do like to use monetary recognition, whether that's points or dollars or sort of one-offs. It can add significance to particular moments or particular milestones along a project journey. And it can give you that short-term boost, right? Nobody's going to say no to something that can get you a Starbucks card or a cool experience or something like that. But really important, and we as practitioners at the Awardco Center of Excellence always try to double down on building that muscle first of non-monetary recognition, and then thinking about how to add the monetary piece on top of that. Any thoughts on that, Bronson?
I just think that is so important. For some reason, I'm not a parent, so yet, hopefully one day, but I don't have any kids. But I remember being a kid, and the motivation piece about non-monetary versus monetary. I remember my parents would often recognize me or appreciate me or say thank you or whatever it might be for doing chores or something. And it would often be like, here's a monetary reward. And I remember equating that to certain task completion. But I don't remember those as much as I remember when my parent was specific and kind and just said, this was really great and I appreciate it, and that might be, no parent's going to say that. That's too business-like, right? Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. But I equate that to work too, is where we're caring for people, where we're managers of people, where we're trying to all accomplish a task. I feel like it can be as simple as a, hey, great job today. That was really, really great. That can have just as much meaning. And especially for programs that don't have a lot of budget to dedicate to monetary recognition, you can still have that same impact, like you were saying. And I think that's so important to remember. It doesn't require a lot of funds behind it to make it impactful.
Exactly. It's about behavior change, and kids or not, it works with your spouse, with your friends, right? What gets recognized gets repeated. If I want my husband to cook more, I don't criticize his cooking. I say, that was incredible. It made me feel calm because you took care of it. And I'm so grateful, right? Those things can get repeated.
Yep.
So how does this work in sort of the ecosystem of our workplaces? Well, it's connected to the individual impact, right? If you build that confidence, autonomy, and connection for the individual, that starts to translate into engagement and commitment and innovation. And then also, if you do recognition from the organizational lens, it starts to build clarity. Like, here's what we support here at our company. Here are our values. Here's the kind of good that we call out. Here's what good looks like. Here's what our top performers look like. That helps drive that extrinsic piece to task completion, right? We're all together. We're trying to do this together. We're trying to make the world better through our business. And all of that leads to better performance. So don't just take our word for it. There's a lot on the shelf related to recognition research, and we like to nerd out on this, but I think the advantage of the Awardco Center of Excellence is in delivering these presentations where we've actually been on the ground and stood these up and had that experience, but then where we've seen the data to back it up. So we're always willing to share the best and latest and greatest research, but also it's nice to hear some stories about how it's worked real time as you set out on your journey as a single person in HR or as a team. So just some highlights from scientific literature. This manager piece is always so critical, right? This is what really gives you the biggest bang for your buck in medium to large increases to performance. It really builds that relationship with the person that they're managing. And then there is an effect on the individual and the team. So if you recognize people across the board, the whole company, you get about a 5% increase in performance from that. But if you start to lean in also and overlay it to the top performers, you get that 7% increase, which is when you start to focus on what good looks like, you want to bring other people along to what good looks like. It doesn't have to be monetary. We talked about that. It improves the quality of the motivation. Monetary award, like points, that's sort of the quantity. And they're complementary. They're not competing. And then I really like this. We've had to go through some bystander training on when people behave badly, but there's also a cognitive off-glow for when people are actually doing good things. So when you hear your coworker express gratitude in person for activities, it really activates our brain, our prefrontal cortex. So it's nice to hear other people being recognized as well. I like to always tell people that I heard some good gossip about them, right? That people were saying nice things about them behind their back. That's kind of helps us lower our blood pressure and feel a little more connected, and maybe assuage a little bit of that imposter syndrome we all have sometimes. Am I doing a good job? What do people think of me? So the more you can bring that and elevate that to life, the better. All right, so that's sort of the general research in the world. I think what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring it down to Awardco specific research. We wanted to sort of go 1 or 2 levels down in some of the levers for recognition. And I'm excited to share that. It's directly correlated to engagement, inclusion, well-being. So what did we do? We asked folks, over 2,000 respondents. This first bit of research was focused on the US and UK. And we will expand that in the next year to international for those of you who work in international organizations. But we wanted to kick it off by looking at this sample of US and UK folks across different industries. So from manufacturing to education, transportation, and logistics. And we wanted to get a cross-section of folks because we wanted to get a sense of how this plays in specific industries. Does it look the same? Does it show up the same? Is there a greater impact? We were also interested in the functions, right? So if you're in administrative support, or maybe you're in customer services and talking to clients all day, maybe you're in HR. Sometimes those of us in HR get the least amount of recognition, even though we're running these programs. But then also as we look at people who are in our product development group, marketing and advertising, sales, and other. And as we know, sales often has a lot more monetary recognition on the line or quotas to make. So that plays out a little bit differently. So we were excited to sort of look at this across different groups. I think for me, having worked primarily in HR tech and engineering, we make a lot of assumptions about how engineers are wired, right? That they're more intrinsically wired, that they may be more introverted, that they don't need recognition. And all of my lived experience, and then a lot of what I will show here, contradicts that. That even if people present as quieter, or maybe they present as really internally motivated, that recognition can be really impactful across the board.
I love that. That's some of my favorite parts of this research, is what motivates certain people. And that, for me, it debunked, just like what you said, certain stereotypes. But it's like, that's actually not true. People feel similarly despite how they may, present outwardly. It's really interesting. I love it.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite part about being a practitioner, Bronson. And sort of, I have all these hunches. I'm like, this works. I know this works, but I haven't always been able to connect it to the data as to why it works. And I think that's how employee experience is really growing. We didn't always have this data. It used to be, for those of you who've been in this field for a while, employee engagement was sort of seen as ping pong tables and snacks and much lighter things. And we've really come to look at it as a science, employee experience and the journey for that whole person, which I think is awesome. Another thing we looked at was level. So are you an individual contributor? Are you a manager? Are you a manager of managers? Or are you a leader? This, I think, is really important. We forget when we build these programs that everyone needs recognition. You need to recognize up to your manager. You need to recognize up to your leader. And I've even seen this super powerfully done. At a company I worked at, the CEO was dealing with a really difficult conversation at a time in the business when we were struggling. And he showed up in the all hands meeting in such an authentic and vulnerable way. And all of a sudden, people started to recognize him on the recognition platform, which I don't think he was super aware of. And that generated these emails to him. And then that was the thing that got him on the platform, seeing that people were appreciating you were vulnerable, you're accessible, you told us the truth. And so for you change managers out there, that was that moment as the recognition lead where I saw that change curve lift up and to the right? I was like, the CEO is on the platform. He's using it, right? But everyone needs to know how they're doing, how their work is landing, not just our individual contributors and frontline folks, but even our leaders and CEO. And then finally, age is really interesting. I've done several presentations on, hey, millennials are different than Gen Z, and Gen Z is different than Gen X. And oh my gosh, the boomers, they don't do recognition at all. Lots of sort of stories that we tell ourselves depending on where we are in the generational time frame. And I think that this is really interesting data that will show, spoiler alert, and you said it already, Bronson, like everyone needs recognition. We may not say it out loud as, Gen Xers who came up in a time when this wasn't part of our workplace, but it's really important across the board. So we wanted to know like what we do and how it leads to what happens. So we wanted to know the mode of recognition. How does this affect the outcome? So is it better to meet with someone one-on-one and tell them they're doing a great job? Do I send them an email? Do I write them a note? Do I instant message them through Slack or Teams? Should I shout them out in a big meeting or a small meeting? Maybe they don't like public recognition. Sort of, what does that mode have to do with recognition in terms of how it lands? The second is we looked at frequency, and lots of thoughts on frequency, but to really see it in black and white in terms of how often you need to feel recognized to actually get that that confidence and that feeling that you're seen in your job was a little bit surprising. And then who's it coming from? Are your peers, are Bronson and I shouting each other out? Or are we talking to our leaders? Or is my manager giving me a shout out? Sort of who is giving that recognition is another piece. And then another interesting piece that I haven't really seen in other research is what about what people choose if you are giving monetary recognition? So you see a lot of offerings in the market. Oh, well, we just do gift cards because that's all that people want. Or we do personalized gifts that are very specific to the person. Or we do cool company items that are branded and connect. Or we give experiences where people can travel or bond as a team. So we looked a little bit more deeply into that and some surprises in that as well. So then we wanted to see, how do these mode, frequency, and reward options translate into engagement, how people feel. Do they feel proud of their company? Do they feel like they want to shout it to the rooftops at the barbecue on the weekend? I really love my company. You should work there. Does it help with their motivation? And then we were talking before the presentation with Connor, just how many people are so interested in this magic intent to stay piece. We are expecting our new workforce, those young professionals coming out of school, like we want them to stay. We want to get the best talent, but they are prepared to move around, not like we did. Maybe we stayed 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 20 years. This new workforce is super mobile. And for some skills, they're so sought after that we want to keep those folks. And that's really important. And then inclusion. There's been a lot in the news about this in terms of formal programs, but I'm really excited and heartened by how recognition can make everyone feel included, seen as who you are for your individual strengths and talents. And so I really like this, feeling like you belong at work, feeling like you can bring your whole self to work, and being able to be authentic. And then well-being, right? We're working more than ever. We're online at night. We're remote. We check our Slacks, guilty of that, before the first cup of coffee. So how does that well-being relate to our energy and confidence? Anything you want to add on this, Bronson, in terms of sort of how we looked at it and the outcomes we were interested in?
I just think that it's really cool that there's so many different points of research here that I agree with you. I haven't seen this done anywhere else as far as the recognition and engagement data sort of tied together. One thing I really love is that inclusion, as we've listed it here, belonging and authenticity can be important across the board as far as like showing up and not having to feel like you have to mask yourself. But in addition to that, it can help remote workers or people that aren't in the office, whether that's because they're in the field or on the floor or whatever it might be, can really tie those people into your culture and help them feel like they belong as well. That can be so difficult if you've got a team that's remote and they don't feel like part of the organization. Recognition practices can have that outcome of pulling people together. And I don't know if you've seen that either in the research here, or maybe we're going to talk about it, but I'm really interested in that piece as well.
Yeah, I don't know if we call it out exactly here, but that proximity bias, right? That you think about the people who are next door to you versus, I've been remote for 5 years, and you feel like sometimes you have to raise your hand in a different way. So I think it does help equalize it and be equitable across the board. So yeah, here's what we ask. What do you do here on the left to have the best impact there? So let's just get a sense for all of you in your relationship with recognition. And this is purposeful. In the last 3 months, have you been meaningfully recognized for good work? And we'll leave meaningful a little loose, but not just like, hey, good job, but really meaningful, where someone has taken the time to recognize you, whatever mode, in the last 3 months. So we'll take that poll to the group.
We've got some answers coming in here. It's really interesting to have this poll maybe perhaps right after a holiday season, which can traditionally have a little bit more recognition sometimes. So this is going to be interesting to see what our audience feels like here. We'll give it a few more seconds as you're all answering, and then we'll come back with the results and see what we have.
And we'll talk about all the different ways people are recognized, because for you, it might look different than for Bronson and for me. But it's important to think about you, meaningful. What feels meaningful to you? And has that happened in the last 3 months?
All right, here we go. Here's the results.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right. Well, that tells me that people are not appreciating HR as much as they should. Yeah, that 48%, that's a little heartbreaking, right? We need this as professionals. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot demanded of us. So for you, 52%, that's great. But yeah, lots to work on here. And maybe some of this data will help you tell the story to your leaders and managers to get those numbers up for yourself as well. Sidebar, when I was working with a mentor of mine who did his research on this, he said the 2 reasons why managers don't recognize are, 1, they never got recognition. So that could be some of us. And 2, they just don't know how to do it. So really teaching people about how to give recognition is a key part of it. All right, well, here's how it shaped out with your peers in different industries. As you can see, I think tech and finance have been a little ahead of the curve in terms of standing up formal programs and looking at the data. They actually are a little higher than even our poll group today here. This group actually kind of fell in more to the education, healthcare, and government and non-for-profit. So maybe we have more folks from that. But I would also say not-for-profit, healthcare, and education are very service-oriented jobs, like HR is a service-oriented job. So people in those fields who really do need recognition, because it's hard work, are showing about kind of the split that we showed on the screen. So why does it matter? What is that impact of that feeling recognized on employee outcomes? Well, the 48% of you who aren't getting this, right? There's so much that could be done to, in aggregate, change how you feel engaged with your work. 31% change. 16%, it can change that you want to stay with the current company or the current boss or the current department, even if all things are equal with pay and benefits, that you would choose to stay because that's part of how you feel connected. 27% in that I'm seen, I can show up authentically, and inclusion. And then 30%, I thought that was really high in that burnout and that well-being. So thinking about all of us in HR, thinking about our colleagues who take care of our children and our elders and our own health, right? We need to make sure that people in all of those fields get recognized. There's also a multiplier, right? So when we ask people, how engaged are you? How likely are you to stay with the company? What's your sense of inclusion? This is the, it's twice as likely to be engaged if you're getting the recognition. It's a little under twice as likely that you want to stick around, right? So that's that attrition piece. Do you feel included? Twice as likely. And then even more than twice as likely to have that well-being at work. So we talked about different functions. I was mentioning engineering and some of the, or sales, right? We might have some preconceived notions, and people might say, as you stand up a recognition program, well, that'd be great for our frontline executive assistants or our customer services group or HR, but that's not going to work for our product development. So slight difference in terms of effect, but effect nonetheless. So it is a universal tool to raise engagement, no matter where you are. But there are definitely some differences, and I think it continues on the next page. Marketing and PR, HR, engineering, customer success. So again, sales say that they may have other incentives. They may be further ahead on being recognized for meeting their goals because that's built into their compensation package. But for everyone, people need to be recognized, and it will multiply not only their intent to stay and their inclusion, but how they feel in terms of their well-being. All right. Anything you want to add to that, Bronson, before I jump into kind of the levers of how to create a recognition program that addresses some of these things?
Yeah, I just think that the well-being piece is really interesting, and maybe this is too warm and fuzzy, but I feel like this group is about data and the warm and fuzzy, right? The HR leaders. But I feel like when people are recognized, then their well-being goes up. That can, like everything, right? Like engagement or any of these other pieces, retention can have a huge impact, not only on their work life, but their life outside of work, and just create this positive feedback loop, right? So if you feel more like you have a greater sense of well-being at work, you're going to take that home with you, and you're going to have a greater sense of well-being in whatever you're doing after work. And then that will kind of continue to feed, and you'll come back and you'll show up at work feeling even better. And I've seen that on my own teams. I manage a small team here at Awardco, and I have seen the power of recognition increase well-being here while at work, but also outside of it. And I feel like that's so impactful. Like the data shows, like it's incredible to see that really benefit the business as well as the individual.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, having worked in other parts of HR, you know, building employee handbooks or rolling out benefits programs or looking at comp, I didn't realize the power on this side of the fence. I was always joking, there's sort of the principal's office side of HR and the Willy Wonka side of HR, right? And if we're lucky, we can work in the best side of that and we can work together. But I have so appreciated that recognition can move the needle. And it's not just an HR program, right? It's a business program.
Yeah.
And to your point, Bronson, We want to feel like we're making a difference at work and doing good work. And I think that this recognition piece, anyone that I have met who's worked in this space has really started to feel the power of it. Like you said, on your own team, but also I've seen this in global companies with 40,000 people that feel like a big super tanker, and you can't change the culture. And I felt those folks start to open up and recognize each other and be more playful and let their guard down. And I think that's not a soft skill, that's a power skill. So
yeah, I love that. Tying this recognition data to engagement data is just, haven't seen that done anywhere else. And it's really exciting to see the benefits of both and how they tie in together. It's incredible research. I love it.
So I always got caught with, well, exactly how are you going to do this? Show me the ROI, show me what you should build. And so as you build or design your own program, there's specific levers you can work with to ensure you're really intentional. You don't just stand up a program, set it and forget it. But where do you put your resources, and how do you design the program to have the maximum impact on engagement? So let's get into that. So mode, this is the how people are recognized. So recognition mode accounts for about 13% of the change of engagement. This is how recognition comes across. So we have found that the how is really critical, and it's not always self-evident as to the places where you're giving recognition. So we ask, kind of like we ask you, in the last 3 months, how have you been recognized for good work? And you can see there's different modalities, right? Some people are just getting that one-to-one contact with their manager. Hey, you really did a great job on that presentation this week. Some people are getting a shout out in a meeting. Congratulations to Madison and our group for really knocking it out of the park this week. Maybe an email from your manager offline, something that's more private. You could get a Slack or a Teams message right while something's going on, like, that was great. Perhaps it's more formal, and we've definitely seen an uptick in these more formal company awards, whether they're connected to values or connected to certain behaviors. And then recognition platform, we love to see that because we really believe that can be the heart of your recognition program. And then other, maybe that's a personal note, or you got to go to a conference or something else. Then people, like almost half of you, said, yeah, I haven't really been recognized. Well, how does that show up in the engagement scores? We found that average engagement scores for people getting some of these different modes, these different ways, 76%. Average engagement score of that other group, it's just really low. And that doesn't mean these people can't be top performers. That doesn't mean these people aren't working hard. It just means that they're not getting that feedback in their life with their manager, in their work, to be giving them that extra energy to be more engaged. And if they're not engaged, they're probably looking for somewhere else to go.
That's true. Christy, we have a question in the chat I'd like to pose to you and get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Even if the research doesn't bear this out, I want to see what your expertise says. So Jacqueline says, what is the best mode of recognition for remote employees?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually think Jacqueline's leading the witness a little bit. We actually found out across, and some of these folks are remote and some of these folks are in person, but the three that are highlighted in green give you the biggest bump. And I don't think those are, obviously an email from the manager and a company award, those are not dependent on you being there in person. One-on-one might be, I don't know how that parses out in terms of if you're physically face-to-face or if you're having that one-on-one conversation. But those three pieces, when we dug into like what exactly helps people feel recognized, those were the three that made the biggest difference. Interestingly enough, because we hear a lot of managers saying, well, I sent a note by Slack. I said, great job by Slack. Just by itself, this has no measurable impact on engagement. So if you're working with managers who say, I don't need a recognition platform, I don't need company awards, I don't need one-on-one meetings, I send a note through Teams or Slack, I get it done, that by itself is not going to move the needle. Layered on top of these other modes, it can be helpful, but it's really not where you should be putting your primary piece. So as you are talking to leaders and managers about how to recognize, I always heard, well, I'm already doing that. Well, first of all, you're probably not doing it as much as you think because even with this group today, only half of us feel like we're getting that recognition. So it's definitely not happening as much as you think, but really thinking intentionally about setting up company awards, setting up emails from managers, teaching managers how to do this, really important. There's a few low-hanging fruits in terms of that piece. And Bronson, you mentioned it, like, how are you seen outside of work? If I have a personal milestone or I've been at the company a certain amount of years, does anyone say anything to me on that day? And especially to Jacqueline's point, remote. Does anyone know if I'm in the Cleveland office and I'm working for the New York group that I've been there for 5 years? And even if I haven't been to the New York office, I really thought this was interesting. If folks have a length of service award, some kind of a celebration of your time at the company, much higher engagement versus maybe we don't have one, or I don't even know, nobody has told me about it. So super low hanging fruit if your company does not do this. Now, doesn't have to be money. It could just be a real celebration and a heartfelt celebration. At Awardco, we have these memory books where people write all the things that they remember from you in the last few years. Like, it's literally on my desk, right? It's something that is meaningful and is some kind of proof of the work I've been doing, which is great. The other thing is birthday awards. And some people don't want their birthdays public, right? We're not talking about the year, we're just talking about the day. But some people are more private. I've found in the 3 or 4 companies where I've done this, it's about 95% of people are fine having their birthdays published. And then there's a 5% holdout of people who say, I don't want any fanfare, no thank you. And that's fine too. You should have a platform where you can have someone make that choice. But regardless, across the board, kind of like we're looking at across industries and levels, higher engagement where there's some kind of recognition for this. I had a big milestone birthday when I started a new job. It was just a little startup. And I remember sitting there all day at my desk and no one said anything to me. And I thought,
really?
That's a miss.
Could have increased engagement and your well-being right off the bat.
Then I moved to employee experience. So maybe it was all for the good.
There you go.
So a lot in the science, like I said, ongoing recognition is really good when it's paired with these awards, like these company awards, right? You want the peer-to-peer firing, you want monthly programs. It's just this multi-layered approach so that people are feeling that in the different spheres where they're working. And then events as well. But I think we've, in the past, at least in employee engagement, we've always over-leveraged on the company party. Well, not everybody wants the company party. Not everybody can come to the company party. So those consistent at a cadence recognitions will give you a lot more bang for your buck than the big party. Mm-hmm. What about demographic? Women, men, age, very little by age level and gender. So slight preference as you get a little older for the one-on-one combo, slight preference for shout outs in a meeting from women, and slight preference for company awards the more senior you are, that holds some sway, but really not significant enough to think that there's a big demographic change in terms of how people want to be recognized. Frequency, this is my favorite, the impact of frequency. So it's even more important than how you do it. And my practice and my managing of teams is I try to catch someone on my team doing something good every day. I have 5 direct reports so that I get to everybody once a week. And it sounds like that's a lot, but it's maybe a 30-second or 1-minute practice just to say, hey, I see what you did. Here's why it's important. And here's how it made me feel. And it's just that very simple, very authentic, very timely recognition that can make all the difference. Could be on a platform, could be one-on-one, it could be something that you tell their boss, right? So that frequency is so critical. So it changes engagement by 15%, 7% in intent to stay, 12% in inclusion, and then that well-being part's coming up at the top with 16%. Really want to circle that. I think that well-being part is so important, especially in high burnout fields, to make sure that there's something happening to see those folks. I've talked to a lot of folks in healthcare. It's sometimes the cafeteria workers, right, who are really making the difference for those families who are there late at night. the night shift folks who no one ever sees, right? So are they being seen either by their peers and their managers who may not even work their same shifts, or even in some cases, as we evolve recognition from their clients and patients from an external recognition, right? Are they getting that feedback that what they do matters and makes a difference? This is a little more granular version of the poll that we did for all of you. We wanted to see, so how often are you recognized by different folks? So your manager, never. That's really sad, 5%, right? And if you take, actually, and we just found out from our colleague in England that the managers in the UK are less likely, they're more likely to have never done this. So we have a little more work to do with our friends across the pond. Yeah. Peers, right? How often do your peers call you out for good work? And then a senior leader. There's still over 30% of folks who less than once a year or never have been seen by that senior leader. And all of us know those senior leaders who really dig down into the organization and call out the good work. Those are the healthiest, less toxic, more motivating places. We've all worked at places that don't have that going on. And I hope you all have worked in places where that really is going on, because it does make all the difference in the world when that VP or SVP or CEO calls you out for good work.
Yeah, that brings up a question in the chat that transitions nicely from William. He says, it's important that everyone get recognized, not just the rock stars. Sometimes all leaders care about are the rock stars, and they fail to recognize the everyday consistent performers. I wonder if there's something you found, or it's in the research here. And if we're going to talk about it, that's great. But how do you get leaders to recognize more? And I know we could have a whole webinar on that, but if there's anything you'd like to say about that, Christy, I'd be really interested in your thoughts.
Oh, I love William's question. I mean, I know that I've been a top performer in some of my roles, but I've also been a disengaged worker in some of my roles. I believe it's in the State of Recognition report, Bronson, but you can actually move people. It's almost like that study, the Pygmalion effect, that if you imagine people are top performers, they will actually move into being top performers. And if you catch people doing good in that consistent way that William's talking about, those solid, good soldier folks, right? That they actually move towards more engaged, and you build out more of those top performers. So I think it's a really good point. I think it also ties back into monetary recognition. We've found that some companies are spending all their money on their top talent, and they're not really thinking about those day-to-day interactions for the general workforce. So I think it's really important to be thoughtful about how you spend that money versus a couple big prizes for the shiny top performers. Those performers also are not always the unsung heroes. So at Okta, we had a ball bearings award, because ball bearing takes out the friction, but you don't always see it.
Yeah.
It was for the unsung heroes. And that was such an incredible award, because to William's point, it called out the people that no one sees. People in other countries, people remote, people in IT, people who are just helping people all the time, and no one sees that. So I think you can develop specific programs for the unsung heroes to help that larger population. It's a great question.
Ball bearing program. I like that. That's great.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
This is my favorite slide in the whole deck, just because it gave me some underscore for some of my hunches, but then it totally challenged me in another way. So recognition from senior leaders has the most impact universally. And you can see on the black line that that recognition from the senior leader is just higher. We found that recognition from the manager has about half of the impact of senior leaders. So very important, but that senior leadership piece should be built into your program. And then recognition from peers, this is the most interesting thing for me. Just by itself, if you're recognizing your peers, it does not impact engagement, or it does not impact, in our research, intent to stay, or even feeling authentic at work. But that peer-to-peer recognition, it's kind of like being in the trenches with someone, being at camp with someone. It does affect well-being. So as you look across your company, what are you trying to solve for? Are you trying to solve for engagement and intent to stay? Then it's really important that you develop programs that have senior leader and manager touch points. Do you have a lot of challenges with well-being and burnout and mental health issues? Then really supercharging that peer recognition and encouraging that so that people feel supported from their peers is the lever that you want to lean in on. And the shelf life. I've probably done 100 presentations for senior leaders where they say, it's too much recognition, this thanking people all the time, that's ridiculous. Well, the research doesn't bear out that way. You really can't overdo meaningful recognition, right? It can't be shallow. It has to be meaningful. So you can't overdo it. There's no limit. People don't say, I've had it up to here. That's too much recognition at work. I'm done. They might want it privately. They might want it in a different way, but you can't really do too much. But there is a shelf life. It does lose its impact. And so different shelf life for managers than for leaders. So for managers, if you don't get it in the last 3 months, which is half of this group, you start to see a significant dip in engagement. And if you don't get that at least annually from the leaders, which gives you a little more play, right? Especially in big companies, it's very hard to do recognition very often from senior leaders. They're busy. But annually, if you don't do that, you start to see that both the blue line and the black line at that every year, they just tank. And so really important to look at this in your own organizations. If you are measuring this in your engagement survey, I highly recommend that you put in a question that's time delineated, like we did here, right? Are you recognized weekly, monthly, annually, just to get a sense of that so you know where to lean in on your program design. And I think where this comes to, where the most impact can be felt is really this manager training piece. That's the front line. Those managers need to know that this is part of their core competence as a manager. It's not a nice to have. If you're going to be a people manager in our company, then you have to be doing a great job at recognition. That's just what we expect. So as I showed on that graph, and you showed with the poll that you did, we found that 1/3 of people are never getting that from their managers. So much to do here. And the most successful companies we've seen with the programs at Awardco is where they tie it back into performance management. So when that manager comes up for a review, it says, hey, Christy, we noticed you recognize this many people, or you're only doing it at this frequency or at this cadence. And what we expect from our managers is that they're doing it at least 3 months, I think, is hard because you forget, like at least monthly or at least weekly, right, to try to get that average up. So if you don't have manager training specifically on recognition, or you don't have accountability on recognition, I think that's a key lever for you to look at to increase engagement in your companies. Demographics. So this blew some of my hypotheses out of the water. Doesn't matter how old you are, you need recognition, right? So millennial, Gen Z, Gen X, boomers, we all need it, even if we don't admit it. Small effect, men are a tiny bit more susceptible, get a little bit more of that increase from a recognition from a senior leader. No difference by level. So everyone needs it. I think, like I said, even the CEO needs it. Everyone needs to know that they're doing a good job. And then finally, this is one that I think is new to the market. Maybe you've seen this before, Bronson, but I've never seen this sort of what people redeem their recognition for actually makes a difference in how engaged they are. So this is how we'll close it out. So impact of redemptions, much lower, sort of in the low double and single digits. It's not as important if there is a monetary reward. It's not as important as how you give recognition or how often, but it still has some variance in how it shows up in your engagement scores, your intent to stay, inclusion, and well-being. So we ask people, okay, what do you want if you're going to get some kind of a monetary reward? Do you want a gift card? Do you want to have a team experience? Do you want some swag? Do you want an experience or travel? And as you can see, and probably all of you who've worked in recognition know, everybody says, yep, just give me the cash, give me the gift cards. And so sometimes we are wanting to be responsive as HR leaders, and we build the program based on the appetite. Well, they want gift cards, let's just give them gift cards. So I really love how we looked to see then, but what actually is better for the company, for engagement, for keeping people, what actually has the most meaning? And what we found are actually those personalized, more curated gifts, something that's meaningful, specific to Bronson, to Christy, to our team, to our group. Team activities, like let's go out all together and do something that makes us feel connected, maybe outside of work, maybe it's a training. And then interestingly enough, company branded apparel or swag. A bit of love for any of you who've ever managed swag in your companies. Sometimes that falls in HR. It's a big job and it's a lot of work, especially in a global company. So know that your inputs are valued. And then interestingly enough, gift cards have it's not a lot, but a slight negative impact on engagement. So I kind of feel like it's with your kids, right? If you ask them what they want to eat, they want to eat candy, but maybe some vitamins in there might be good too. So what people ask for is not always the best thing for the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So highest impact was the company branded apparel or swag. Very surprising to me in terms of the pride that instills in the company. Second highest was team engagement or outing. So I just think this is fascinating. It's definitely, when I was designing my first and second engagement program, I wouldn't have thought about this. I just thought, oh, they want gift cards, let's give them gift cards. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add, Bronson?
Just to answer Jacqueline's question in the chat, you asked, how does this apply best for remote employees? Just want to highlight again that, like you said at the beginning, Christy, this survey and this research was done across both remote and in office. So this actually does apply right to remote employees. It's a really valid question. Like, do remote employees value things differently? And there probably is a little bit of variance. And if you're interested in more, you can definitely read our State of Recognition white paper. There's a lot more research in depth, and you can dive into that. But it's a very good question. So thank you for that, Jacqueline. Appreciate it.
And then maybe just to add to Jacqueline's piece, if you've ever worked in a headquarters, right, where there's a swag store or a lot of swag being passed around at events, you have a different employee experience than you do if you're a remote employee. So I know that we've always tried to be equitable and send things out to people remotely, because that is a point of pride as well, to not forget about those folks that we don't see in the office.
Yep.
And then demographic again. This is going to sound like the last two. Not a bunch of difference in terms of gender. A small impact for team experiences if you're a leader, because, and I've heard this for sure, can I use my points to do something for my team instead of for myself? You tend to see an interest in giving back to the team. And then very interesting, 18 to 24-year-olds, this is our only sort of generational piece, which is our Gen Z coming in. They're not even into gift cards. They're breaking the mold. They do love swag. So that was surprising to me. I would do a caveat. They probably are into ecologically friendly swag from what I've seen, but they're definitely interested in those pieces. So I think to close, if you want to design a program for maximum impact, if you're really thinking about attrition and engagement and inclusion and well-being, you have these levers to work with, right? Frequency, more is better, but there's a minimum frequency. If they're not getting it, like many of you aren't getting it, and good job, by the way, those of you who haven't gotten recognition, it breaks my heart that you're not getting that on a cadence. You have to hit that frequency. Mode, it does vary by individual, but awards have universal impact. So thinking about how those recognitions come across, make sure you have some company awards as part of that as well. The catalog, what employees want, doesn't necessarily have the most impact that you're looking for. So think about a mix of things that are good for employees' interests, but also for your own company goals. And then don't over-index or overthink too much on what do people want. And to be clear, this is US and UK, so we'll come out with more research on international, but don't over-index in the US on women versus men, Gen X versus Gen Z, levels. It really is a universal that people want to have recognition in many modes as frequently as possible, with some choices on how they spend their points if you do have a monetary piece. And I think that leaves us in the question section.
I love this. Thank you, Christy. Thank you for leading us through all that research. It's very interesting. If you would like to look more into it, I put a link to the white paper in the chat there if you're interested to learn more. But we do have probably time for one or two more questions. There's one in the chat I want to pose to you, Christy, and get your thoughts on.
Sure.
It's from Dallas, and he says, our warehouse workers tend to not get enough recognition or even basic communication or invites. They get things sent to their personal email. They don't even get a company email address. What can you suggest to improve their experience?
Oh, Dallas, it's a great question. We really have leaned into the idea of the deskless worker or the frontline employee. There are some incredible new products that can happen. And again, it comes back to manager and leaders. But what I've seen be most effective in deskless environments in the US and also abroad in China, in the Philippines, is those managers having some kind of a recognition vehicle, like a card or something that they can redeem on their own time, and basically walking the line and catching people doing something good. So usually when your leader, your SVP shows up to the line, you're like, oh my gosh, they're doing a safety check or they're going to catch me. Really flipping that narrative to catch people doing something good. And there are people on the line. There are those frontline managers who do this already and do it well. You want to incentivize them to do more of this and give them more tools. So we have a whole presentation on that that I think we could share out. But the deskless worker, the deskless divide is really crucial to make sure that that's equitable for those people who don't have a desk or a company email, and they're the lifeblood of your organization.
Yeah, very true. If you would like to see one of those presentations, we have one coming up in April, and you can find that on our events page on our website if you're interested to join that. We'll have that up in the next day or two. But yeah, thank you for that question, Dallas. Christy, in the last minute or two, what thoughts do you have as a whole about this research? What is your favorite pieces? What are some key takeaways that our viewers can take from this?
Yeah, I always go back, am I dating myself, to the sort of Oprah Winfrey after she would interview the most famous people in the world, right? Queens and kings and presidents and movie stars. After anyone does something like that, the lights go off, and in those private moments, they would turn to her and say, how did I do? Did I do a good job? And I think it's a fundamental human need, not just an employee need, to get that feedback. And I think design your programs with intention so that people can feel that, and you'll be doing good work every day.
I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you again for your expertise and for sharing all this with us. We're grateful for all the questions. Thank you for sending those along. Please keep in touch with us. We'll be sending out follow-up emails just to make sure that you have all the resources you're looking for. You can also connect with me, myself, or with Christy on LinkedIn. We'll be happy to get you any information you need. Thank you.